I'm meteorologist James Hopkins. Thanks for joining us here on 10 Tampa Bay Plus. Of course, we are tracking the tropics, always tracking the tropics. It's that time of year that we're tracking the tropics. And for those of you who watch us regularly, or if you're just joining us, we have a new face here at 10 Tampa Bay. Go ahead and tell everyone about yourself.
Yes. James is avoiding my last name because it is very long and intimidating. I am Courtney Jacobazzi. I'm from South Florida, so originally from the Fort Lauderdale area, but grandparents are here in the Tampa area, so really happy to be back near them. I've been doing weather for almost 10 years now. Came from Atlanta back to the beautiful Sunshine State, and really excited to be here. Tropics are my fave, so I clearly lived through a lot of hurricanes in my years growing up in South Florida. So really excited to be here, excited to be with this team and kind of take everyone through all of this as we go through the peak of the season here. Yeah,
things are of course really starting to get very active. They have over the past couple of weeks, and we're coming up to our peak here very shortly. So yeah, same here. Love the tropics, love tracking stuff that is not going to be bothering us.
Those are our favorite. I call them fish storms, James, because they only bother the fish, not us. We'll take it.
The fish, and luckily up to the north, they don't even bother the cruise ships. So that's good news. So let's jump right in. So what we're looking at again is it's getting pretty active. Of course, we've been talking about Erin all week. We talked about Erin, what it did to the coast there near Jacksonville, and also up through the Carolinas. Had some 20, 25-foot swells up there for the Outer Banks, had mandatory evacuations, and the good news is that one is moving its way up and out. Look how active we are in the tropics. Got a couple of things going on right now. That little yellow X, we don't have to worry about that one. But we have two other potential systems that we're going to be watching closely. First off, let's talk about Hurricane Erin. 90-mile-per-hour winds still, 956 at central pressure, so that's still pretty impressive. And it's moving to the east-northeast, and check that out, 28 miles an hour. It's getting picked up by a front, which is good news, and it is going to continue to race its way out of here, so not really going to be much of a bother. So it is now 460 miles north-northeast of Bermuda. You see St. George there labeled on the map. So again, it's moving at 28 miles an hour, and it'll continue on that track as we go throughout the rest of the day today. But check that out, going to be a remnant low as we go throughout maybe the afternoon into the evening, and it'll continue on that track. It's going to slowly weaken, but as you can see, still relatively strong with the winds. And as we go into next week, you see it kind of stalling out there. So it's going to be possibly an issue for Ireland, maybe up towards Iceland as well. And they're going to get some high surf out of this one as well. They do get some pretty strong low pressure systems that come through that area as it is, called mid-latitude cyclone. So extra tropicals when it makes that transition over to that cold core low, which of course it's going to be doing. It's moving into some much cooler waters. But look at the spaghetti models on that one. And possibly taking that one all the way down, maybe, as you can see, up towards France. So that'll be another interesting one for us to follow. Again, interesting because it's going away from us. Now, this is one of the things that we did focus on last week, was how accurate the cones were. Now, there was and always will be shifts in these cones, especially when you go out day 4, 5, 6. Because of the fact that there's always things that are going to be really affecting that. And one of the things was how quickly this storm blew up into a Category 5 storm, went through an eyewall replacement cycle on Sunday, and then it did weaken a little bit. And one thing we explained when we were talking about the steering is that big ridge of high pressure. Now, if your hurricane weakens, the ridge is going to push it a little bit more. The stronger it is, it doesn't need to find as weak of a spot for it to move through. So as you can see there, it was pretty accurate. It did start to make a little bit of that shift. You see that black line, and that black line here is of course, the actual path going up right here. Just wobble, look at it. Take a piece of spaghetti wobbling back and forth there. And of course, there is your current forecast. Same thing on the track history as well. You can see the black were the previous forecasted tracks, and it did follow pretty good. There was that west shift that took it closer to North Carolina. The good news is never did make landfall as expected. That was the one thing that was very prominent with the forecast on this one, is the fact that it was not expected to make landfall. So again, that one's working its way up and out. So let's go ahead and head over to the next one. So you can see we got two things going on. One of them just to the north there of the Leeward Islands, and that one has an 80% potential over the course of the next 2 days, going into the weekend, and 90% over the next 7. more than likely, this one's going to be a depression as we go throughout the weekend. And the good news is where the models are taking this one. This is Tropical Wave Invest 90, and you can see the forecast models. We have one that originates in the wrong spot, but as you can see for the rest of them, it's pretty consistent. And you can see here, I'll put my pointer out, Bermuda is actually right there under the M. So all these forecast models taking it to the east of Bermuda. So yeah, that's some wonderful news there. And if you compare the forecast models of the Euro and the GFS, really looking at the same thing. They take it to the east of Bermuda. So what we're going to see is the potential again to have something develop. And this one's the European model. And you can see there, it doesn't really have, that much there. Of course, you see that convection that's on the eastern side of it. There again is Bermuda. You take it up and there it is. Look how far past to the east of Bermuda that is. You take the measuring tape here and you can see here probably the center would be right there, about a little over 300 miles to the east of Bermuda. We like that because of course we don't want it passing to the west of Bermuda, so that's where you get impacts to the Outer Banks. But again, you see this, the same thing with the GFS. As you can see, it starts to develop. GFS likes it a little bit better, but let me put my measuring tool on this one and look how far this one is from us. That's almost 1,200 miles away. So not going to be a worry there. It's going to move its way up towards Bermuda. You see again how close it is. There is Bermuda right there. And it also is moving its way to the east of Bermuda before moving its way up and out. So the good news with this one, Courtney, is we've got actually Erin is one of the reasons why this is doing what it's doing, why it's going to do the track it is, why forecast models are not expecting it to be too strong. And it's interesting to see one kind of follow the other. Right, Courtney? Yeah,
absolutely. And you were talking about that ridge that's in the middle of the Atlantic. We call this the Bermuda High, and that helped steer Erin. This was kind of the fight here between the storms. If this continued to grow really strong and Erin didn't blow up like it did, that could have pushed everything closer to the coast. But with Erin growing and rapidly intensifying, I mean, James, how quickly it went from Category 1 then to major to 5. It really only took 48 hours or so once it really started getting its steam. But nonetheless, that created kind of a weakness in the ridge. You can see these lines here. This is tracing all the way around this ridge of high pressure here. And you can see that dip, that weakness that Erin's going to follow up into the cooler waters across the pond, if you will. Now, when it comes to Invest 90, here's a little dot of maybe it trying to develop. But it is, as that ridge remains a little weak, as Erin passes by on the north side of it, this is going to take advantage of that weakness and try to ride around this ridge, really hug it. So you can see how it curves in here. But if this ridge grew really strong and really large, that could have maybe pushed this a little further this way, and that could have allowed that invest, what we're calling Invest 90L right now. It's just essentially a disturbed area that is going to try to grow into something potentially, again, as James mentioned, maybe a tropical depression. But if this grew strong again, it could take advantage of some warm waters of the Gulf Stream here, maybe could have become stronger, but that's not looking like it's the case, which is good news. And this is going to, again, continue to go north, maybe strengthen, as James was talking about. The GFS likes it more than the Euro, so we'll be keeping an eye on it. But most importantly, it is not going to impact us here on the Gulf Coast, and it doesn't look like it's going to have any impact on the lower 48 as of right now, but we'll continue to keep an eye on it. Now, once that goes north, this ridge is going to grow pretty strong. So what's going to happen is anything that develops off the coast is going to continue to march off to the west, a little bit closer maybe to the Lesser Antilles, maybe over towards the Dominican Republic. So we are watching another invest that James is going to talk about in just a minute, that it does have a track like this, but it's going to run into some issues that maybe necessarily aren't going to leave it quite as favorable for development. Let's talk about some of the reasons that as that first invest goes north, that it might not be able to hold on to any life. We have Hurricane Erin that's swirling along the east coast here and moving off to the east-northeast very quickly right now. And as these storms swirl like this, what they do is they push the top water off the ocean, and underneath in the deeper ocean waters, the water is very cool, and that starts to rise. We call that upwelling in the meteorology world. That's your fancy weather word for the day. And that kind of cools off the sea surface temperature. And as I'm sure you know, if you've been following the tropics, hurricanes thrive on really warm water. That magic number is kind of around 84 degrees. And we are seeing where Erin did cool the water down along the coast here. We're looking at temperatures, water temperatures, sea surface temperatures in the upper 70s, where Erin just was, paralleling the Carolina and Virginia coastlines here. And then its track, which you can see by this white line here, still looking at low 80s. So the water has rebounded a little bit. The water temperatures have rebounded a little bit. But take a look at this. If a storm managed to make it into the Florida Straits, the Caribbean, the Gulf, it is bathwater there. I'm sure if any of you have stepped into our beautiful oceans along the Gulf Coast, it's been very, very warm. The water temperature is sitting closer to 90 degrees. So we are very thankful that nothing is moving in that way, because plenty of fuel for those storms. But they are battling plenty of other factors, things like wind shear. Also, we have some Saharan dust still, and dust is very dry air that kind of cuts off any kind of ability for those storms to really thrive. So good news on that front, but Erin definitely cooling the water down. But as we watch storms maybe try to march this way, plenty of warm water. But I will talk about in just a few minutes what is potentially keeping what we're calling Invest 99L from developing into anything bigger than it could be. So James, you're going to talk about that second wave coming off the African coast.
Yeah, and the good news with 90, like you were just talking about, looking at some of the forecast models, we only really have one that takes it up to a hurricane strength,
right.
And that's a weak category 1, where the rest of them, it looks like there's about 8 other models here that all have it tropical storm status. I actually have one that doesn't even take it to tropical storm status, but we have most of them keeping them right there tropical storm strength. And we have a couple of others that are a little better on trajectory than they are on intensification. So some of those show it a category 1 storm. So what it looks like is that will more than likely have a name, and possibly again going through the weekend, and I'll show you that one in just a minute. But let's go back down now a little bit further to the south, and what we're going to see here is the next one. Now this one was actually an invest prior, just because it had a higher chance for development over the course of the next 2 days, and it's still got a medium chance. And forecast models, again, the reason why this one hasn't jumped up much is because forecast models are not really liking this one at all. We've got most of the forecast models not even taking it to tropical storm status, kind of right there on the borderline of a depression to maybe tropical storm, and then maybe strengthening up a little bit once we get to hour 120. But once some of them get to hour 120, they have it dying down. So again, there is your disturbance there. It looks like it's getting a little bit more convection as we go throughout, well, for them, it's early afternoon, but as we go throughout the day, look at the forecast models, and you'll notice that a lot of them end right there as it makes its way into the Caribbean. So you see, of course, the labels here. This is where those end. Got a couple of them pushing down a little further, a couple of them going maybe into the central Caribbean before dying out. And these models here, tabs, the tab M and the D, those are more for trajectory than they are for strength. So some of the forecast models, they got some biases. Some do better on other things, where others do better on like wind speeds or rainfall potential. We've talked about that before. Euro is one of the ones we use. Is really good on the track. And so GFS, I think, is a little bit better, especially when it gets closer to land on the rainfall. Now, this one I hear, this forecast model is the European and the European and the GFS together. Not all the other forecast models, but just those two. These are the ensemble runs, where they do multiple runs for the same system. And as you can see, they don't really like it much either. Once it passes the Lesser Antilles here, we are seeing it. So there's your islands here. Got Barbados, which is kind of like right here, and has it actually passing to the south, and then has it either dying out or maybe pushing its way into land. And again, same thing with the other one. Look at your forecast winds. Here is the European model. And so you look for that closed circulation, and you're really not seeing much. Here we go towards the end. And again, you might see a little something here, but you're not really looking at much when it comes in terms of any closed circulation. So European model doesn't like this one all. The GFS, again, which is usually one that's a little bit more gung-ho for making these develop. You can see you run that through all the way Tuesday, not really seeing much there, and even into midweek next week, not seeing much with that one. So we got some different factors, Courtney, that are actually kind of going to help us out with this one too. And again, that's the good news, is the forecast models are not liking this one either, right?
Right, and I know a lot of people taking vacations this time of year. the cruises this time of year. Everyone keeps their eye, especially on the Caribbean. Good thing is it looks like everything kind of goes south of all the Bahamas and everything like that for everyone traveling. But a risky time this time of year to hop on a cruise ship because of the peak of activity. But thankfully, everything looks good right now. We'll continue to watch that for you, though, of course. All right, so James was talking about how models kind of paused it as it moved past the Lesser Antilles here and made its way off into the Caribbean. It kind of stopped about right here. Well, take a look at this. What you're looking at is the Saharan dust, and Saharan dust is not good for tropical development. Essentially, tropical systems are essentially heat engines. They thrive off of really warm, moisture-rich conditions. What happens is they take in all of the warm water in the Atlantic or the Gulf, depending on where they develop, and as all that water rises within these thunderstorms, it condenses into those thunderstorm clouds. Well, when that happens, it releases heat, right? And so that allows these storms to grow nice and strong. Well, when you have dry air, that prevents that whole process, essentially the water cycle that you learned when you were a kid, and that prevents storms from developing. So notice where the trajectory of 99 is going, and I know we're throwing all these numbers at you, but this wave in the central Atlantic, and just so you know, if you don't, I'm sure we've covered this before, invests are essentially just investigating the system. They're continue to investigate it. But nonetheless, as this moves towards Lesser Antilles over into the Caribbean, it's going to run into a lot of dry air, and that's a good thing because if you remember, the water's really warm down there. So we need that dry air to kind of shut off some of the fuel and some of the growth as any systems try to move this way, as again, that ridge of high pressure grows really strong and kind of steers everything this way anyway. But look at this steady stream of dry air coming off the African coast. I actually took a look, and there's actually some fairly high drought conditions going on the northern coast here of Africa. So that could be kind of promoting some of that drier air pushing off of there. So we like that. We need that. That will kind of prevent anything from developing off the coast, which is somewhere that we do typically look this time of year. Everything comes off the African coast, moves through what we call the main development region here in the central Atlantic, and then depending on its kind of steering current, where it goes. So we're glad to see that dry air. That's going to kind of cut off everything. Something else that we watch, of course, in the tropics is wind shear, because storms don't like that either. Essentially, as hurricanes develop and start to rotate and create those really tall thunderstorms, it sucks in all that warm water, but wind shear tilts the storm. So it kind of disrupts its flow. It disrupts its process to continue to strengthen. So wind shear kind of cuts off some of these cloud tops here and interrupts any kind of development for these storms to grow really strong. And we are seeing still some wind shear, not super high, but in the central Atlantic and over towards the Caribbean, still seeing some wind shear. And we're definitely seeing it from some fronts that are starting to develop to our north. And what these fronts are going to do for our friends to the north, Chief Meteorologist Bobby Duskin's like, this might be worth traveling up here because they are going to get a full-blown taste of fall pumpkin spice lattes and hand kind of weather to the north. We're talking mornings in the 40s and 50s, highs in the 70s, super dry. But look at that wind shear, really high from these fronts. And sometimes those can push storms off the coast. So we like those. Those kind of protect us from storms most of the time. And they also do create wind shear. But I say most of the time because sometimes what these fronts can do, if they stall out, and a lot of times they do stall out right over us here in Florida, so we don't get that nice, cool, crisp fall air. Sometimes we can get these little kinks to develop along them, and then you'll get these lows to start to develop, and those can sometimes turn tropical. So we still have to watch out for that. That's not necessarily the most common way that we watch for storms this time of year, but it's still a possibility. So we'll have to watch these fronts because it does look like we'll have several moving into the southeast. Not here in Florida, though. Unfortunately, we are not going to get any of that fun. That's going to stay to all of our friends in Georgia and up the Appalachian Mountains and the Midwest. But if they do stall out and hang out over the water here, sometimes we can get little spins on that. So we'll be keeping an eye on it. But the good news is, James, right now, really even into kind of the beginning of September, us here on the Gulf Coast, we look like we're in good shape when it comes to any kind of threat from tropical systems. Yeah, absolutely. And the main development region is always this time of the year, the area that we watch because of where these storms come from. And you can see that main development region is what we're going to be focusing on probably for at least the next month or so, because we don't get that transition till we go pretty much into October, where we see more of the Caribbean and then into the Gulf. And like she was mentioning, when they come up and they pass maybe through the Greater Antilles or the Bahamas, that's where you see them get picked up by the fronts and pushed away. But, you know, living here in Florida, we rarely get those cold fronts coming through until we get maybe a little closer to December or January. But for us, it would be more of that, more of those Gulf systems. And
And the good news is right now things are looking pretty good for us again. We're going over the next 10 days and we look pretty good. So let's go to what is more than likely the name we're going to have. By the way, I want to show you this. Of course, we had Andrea, Barry, Chantal, and Dexter, all tropical storms. Erin was our first hurricane of the season. As you can see, that label of a 5, our first, not only hurricane, our first major hurricane and our first Cat 5 storm of the season. And again, the good news is not making any landfall, but there was impacts there. Trust me, we know there's impacts because we saw what happened up in the Carolina coast with that surf. There's going to be lots of beach erosion up there, and this is going all the way into New England, New York, and New England dealing with that right now as Erin pulls away. So we got the next one, and it is Fernand. So I guess you just don't pronounce the D. So it's not Fernand, it's Fernand. That'd be the next system. So that's the next one we're looking at. So talking about hurricane season, here we are. You see that yellow line. We're coming to almost the end here of August. Today's the 22nd, and you can see where that peak is going into September. So it's really now all the way until about this time towards the end of September where we start to see them going down. And of course, that doesn't mean that we're going to see less activity. That's just typical where we see the most activity there, and that is on September the 10th. You see that peak. You see us on this stretch going up. See a couple little peaks here, but that's where it's the highest. That is September 10th. And again, this time of year, it's the main development region. That is where we're keeping our eyes. So look at next week. This is Tuesday the 27th through September the 2nd. And there is a low potential again for maybe another wave coming off the coast of Africa. And then you look at the week after that, and that would probably be the same wave or the same area there in the main development region. And of course, that's where we're going to be keeping a close eye on things. So let's kind of reel it back here and come home, because what we're going to see is a pretty wet weekend ahead. We're talking about average rainfall to maybe a little bit above. Look at your showers, so a few isolated storms in the afternoons. But here's the good news. Most of your afternoons and late afternoons and the evenings, not looking too bad. So that's what we're going to see as we go to the weekend forecast. And there is your expected rainfall for today. Had a lot of heavy rain up along the Nature Coast early this morning. That's all going to be pushing its way inland as we go throughout our afternoon here and into the evening. And then Saturday and Sunday, still some pretty good rain chances there. So let's take a look at the reason why. So we have a front that's going to stall. It's going to be up to our north, but it's going to be hanging out for the entire weekend. So we're going to see the potential for some morning showers, a few afternoon storms, and then as we go into next week, this is what we were just talking about with these fronts. Now, actually, the morning run of the GFS showed this front maybe coming through. Unfortunately, not going to come through enough to really provide us with any taste of fall here in Florida. But what it is going to do is keep those afternoon rain chances around. What we're going to see going into next week is a little less of a chance of seeing the morning showers, just more of the maybe a stray shower in the morning with an afternoon thunderstorm. Again, that is your typical summertime pattern here in Florida. There is that front stalling, and it does look like our rain chances are going to be going up for Thursday and into Friday. So let's look at your future cast. Again, as we go throughout this evening, things are not going to be as active for this afternoon as we're going to be seeing again for tomorrow. Look at tomorrow morning, looking at the same scenario, not expecting again as heavy of rain as we saw this morning, but we will see those scattered showers and thunderstorms through early afternoon. And again, here's more good news. If you plan on heading out to the Bucks-Bills preseason game, 7:30, not too bad. And again, forecast model could shift back and forth just a little bit, but not expecting it to change too much. So the better chance to rain Saturday is going to be probably morning and through your mid-afternoon. So if you're going to be out heading tailgating, just be aware of that. And then those will gradually die down into the overnight and then repeating on Sunday. There is more shower activity, storms in the morning than we typically see. Because again, usually we see a few stray showers pushing in just because we have that west flow. And then there is your midday for Sunday. And then things do start to wind down afternoon and going into the evening. Now, we are part of the excessive rainfall outlook, but it's only marginal. And it is around the bay and up towards the north where we could have the potential. And this is the reason we have isolated heavy downpour potential. And this is again for both Saturday and for Sunday where we're going to see this potential. There's Sunday as well. where we have that potential. Zoom into our area. It's up along the Nature Coast. Actually, it's for much of the area, including Polk County and all around the bay down into Manatee County as well, where we could have the potential for some of these isolated heavy downpours. And the only good news I got for you is we do still need the rain. So here's your forecasted rainfall as we go throughout Friday evening, Saturday, and Sunday. As you can see, most of the rainfall, heaviest, is going to be along the coast. You got anywhere from maybe up close to an inch there for Clearwater, but widespread, what we're looking at is 1 to 2 inches along the coast and maybe up to about an inch inland. Again, widespread. We already saw this morning. We had Doppler radar 5.5 inches up just north of Crystal River just this morning alone. So that goes to show what these heavy downpours can do when we have those that are moving through the area. So finally, let's look at our drought conditions. And again, not too bad. We do have a moderate drought stretching through Polk County, Hardy, DeSoto. So we definitely could lead the rain. Let's show you Bills versus the Bucks. Tailgating, you got about 90 degrees. And again, by the time, if you wait till 2 or 3 or 4 in the afternoon, we still have a good chance for some showers and storms. But the good news is, though, chances are going down for kickoff. 86 degrees at kickoff, 84 at halftime, 82 by the time the game ends. And again, things not looking too bad. 7-day forecast, there it is. We're showing again that potential for some showers and storms throughout the weekend. Again, the difference between this and what we consider normal is we are going to see a little bit more rain in the morning, Saturday and Sunday. And then as we go throughout next week, we'll see those temperatures in the low 90s. The good news is we have one day in the next 10 days where we're forecasted to be in the triple digits for that heat index. So there's your good news for you. And then next week, all those 40s are, again, maybe a stray shower in the morning and then afternoon and evening thunderstorms, your typical summertime Florida pattern here. So again, we'll continue to watch the tropics for you. So keep it here. And again, expect another named system as we go through the weekend, but not worried about that one bothering us at this time.